There are two types of people in this world: those who move through life from fear, and those who move through life from sovereignty. You can see it in their eyes, in their posture, in the way they speak, in the way they choose, and the way they respond when the world pushes back. The fear-based person is always calculating, always measuring, always asking, what will I lose? What if I fail? What if they leave? What if I'm not enough? The sovereign person is always creating, always choosing, always asking, what do I actually want? What aligns with who I am? What serves my vision? And here's what you need to understand. These aren't personality types. These aren't fixed identities. These are operating systems, and you're running one of them right now. If you're watching this, something inside you already knows which one you're running. You've felt the weight of it, the exhaustion of making every decision from a place of scarcity, the terror that drives your choices, the panic that lurks beneath every interaction. You are fear-based, and it's destroying everything you touch, not because you're weak, not because you're broken, but because fear makes you predictable, and predictability makes you prey. In relationships, you're the one who texts back immediately, who rearranges your life to fit their schedule, who panics when they pull away, who clings harder when you should let go. In work, you're the one who won't take the risk, who stays in the safe job, who asks for permission instead of forgiveness, who waits for the perfect moment that never comes. In life, you're the one who's always defending, always explaining, always trying to prove you're enough to people who haven't earned the right to judge you. Soren Kierkegaard understood this terror. He called it existential anxiety, the dizzying freedom of being responsible for your own choices in a world that offers no guarantees. And he saw how most people respond to this anxiety. They flee from freedom. They trade sovereignty for certainty. They give up choice for safety. They become fear-based. And once you become fear-based, the world can smell it on you. People sense it. Opportunities avoid it. Life itself seems to conspire against you. Because fear-based people are easy to read, easy to manipulate, easy to control. They're desperate. And desperation is the weakest position in any negotiation with life. But sovereignty is different. Sovereignty says, I will face what needs to be faced. I will want what I want without apology. I will choose based on my values rather than my fears. And the world doesn't know what to do with that. This is the division that matters. Not rich or poor, not successful or struggling, but fear-based or sovereign. And the brutal truth is this: you've been fear-based for so long, you've forgotten there's another way to be. Let me show you how this works. You meet someone, a potential partner, a potential opportunity, a potential change, and immediately your nervous system starts calculating, not what you want, but what you might lose. Can I afford to want this? What if they reject me? What if it doesn't work out? What if I'm not good enough? You haven't even asked yourself if this is what you actually want. You've skipped straight to the terror of not getting it. This is fear-based operation, and it infects every decision you make. Watch what happens. You like them, so you become available, too available. You rearrange your schedule. You text back immediately. You make yourself smaller to fit into their life. Why? Because you're afraid. Afraid they'll lose interest. Afraid they'll find someone better. Afraid this is your only chance. You're negotiating from scarcity, and scarcity makes you worthless in the marketplace of human connection. Because here's what you don't see. The person you're pursuing can feel your fear. They sense your desperation, even if you're trying to hide it. It's in the speed of your text responses. It's in the way you agree too quickly. It's in how you mold yourself to what you think they want. And it repels them. Not because they're cruel, but because fear-based energy is prey energy. And no one wants to be with prey. Or maybe it's not a person. Maybe it's a job, a project, a dream. Same mechanism, same pattern. You want it, so you become desperate for it. You convince yourself you need it, that without it, you're nothing, that this is your one shot. And from that place of terror, you make your move. You over-explain in the interview. You take whatever terms they offer. You communicate that you need them more than they need you. And they lowball you. Or they pass entirely. Or they hire you, but treat you as expendable. Because you showed them you're fear-based. And fear-based people are easy to control. Kierkegaard saw this everywhere. People who could not bear the weight of their own freedom. Who needed the crowd to tell them what to choose. Who needed certainty more than they needed truth. He called them the public, the they, the ones who live by opinion rather than conviction. And he watched how they suffered, not from lack of options, but from inability to choose from anything other than fear. You are the public. You are the they. You make every choice based on what you're afraid of losing, rather than what you're committed to gaining. Your whole life is a defensive crouch. And here's the mechanism you don't see. Fear doesn't just influence your decisions. Fear makes you readable. When you're fear-based, people can predict you. They know what you'll tolerate. They know what you'll accept. They know how far they can push, because your fear tells them exactly where your boundaries dissolve. You become a solved equation. And once you're solved, you're controllable. In relationships, they know you won't leave. In work, they know you won't ask for more. In life, they know you won't take the risk, so they treat you accordingly. Not because they're bad people, but because you've shown them who you are. Someone who chooses from fear. Someone who can be managed. Someone who will accept less than they deserve, because they're terrified of ending up with nothing. This is your operating system, and it's running in the background of every interaction, every choice, every moment you think you're being strategic, but you're actually just being scared. You think you're protecting yourself, but you're actually advertising your vulnerability to everyone who knows how to read it. Now, let me show you the other way. The sovereign person operates from a completely different frame, not from what they fear losing, but from what they're committed to creating. Watch how differently this plays out. They meet someone, a potential partner, and their first question isn't, will they want me? Their first question is, do I want them? Not in an arrogant way, not in a cold way, but in a sovereign way. They're evaluating. They're discerning. They're asking, does this person align with who I am and where I'm going? Does this serve my vision? Does this expand me or contract me? And if the answer is yes, they move forward. Not desperately, not carefully, but directly. They don't text back immediately because they're not afraid of losing the opportunity. They're calibrating whether the opportunity is worth their time. They don't mold themselves to fit. They show up as they are and let the other person decide if that works for them. And here's what happens. The other person feels it. They sense the sovereignty. They recognize they're not dealing with someone who needs them. They're dealing with someone who's choosing them. And that changes everything. Because sovereignty is attractive, not in the superficial sense, but in the deep nervous system sense of recognizing someone who operates from abundance rather than scarcity, someone who has options, someone who knows their value, someone who will walk away if the fit isn't right. That's magnetic. That's rare. That's what everyone is actually looking for, even if they don't know it. Or maybe it's not a person. Maybe it's that job, that project, that opportunity. The sovereign person doesn't need it. They want it. Big difference. They go into the interview knowing they have value to offer. They negotiate from the assumption that good opportunities want good people. And if this isn't that, there will be others. They don't over-explain. They don't pre-apologize. They don't communicate desperation. They communicate capacity, readiness, alignment, and the organization feels it. They recognize they're dealing with someone who has standards, someone who's evaluating them as much as they're being evaluated, and they make a better offer. Or they don't. Either way, the sovereign person is fine, because their worth isn't determined by this single outcome. Nietzsche understood this as master morality, not in the sense of dominating others, but in the sense of being the master of your own values. The master says, I determine what's good. I decide what matters. I choose based on my vision rather than your opinion. The slave says, tell me what's good. Show me what matters. I'll choose based on avoiding punishment and seeking approval. You've been living in slave morality, letting your fear dictate your choices, letting scarcity determine your worth, letting the terror of loss override the clarity of vision. And it shows in every interaction, in every negotiation, in every moment you think you're being careful, but you're actually just being controlled by fear. Sovereignty is the opposite. Sovereignty is choosing from abundance even when resources are scarce. Sovereignty is acting from vision even when the outcome is uncertain. Sovereignty is being unpredictable because you're guided by internal values rather than external pressures. And that makes you dangerous in the best possible way. Dangerous to anyone who wants to manipulate you. Dangerous to any system that depends on your fear. Dangerous to any relationship built on your neediness rather than mutual respect. You become someone who can't be read, can't be predicted, can't be controlled, because you're not making decisions from fear. You're making decisions from sovereignty. Here's what you need to understand about these two operating systems. They create completely different realities. When you're fear-based, you see the world through the lens of scarcity. Every opportunity looks like your last chance. Every person looks like someone you might lose. Every choice looks like a potential disaster. And from that frame, you make fear-based choices, which create fear-based results, which confirm your fear-based worldview. You create a self-fulfilling prophecy of scarcity. But when you're sovereign, you see the world through the lens of abundance. Not naive abundance, not pretend abundance, but the deep knowledge that you will create value wherever you go, that you will find opportunities because you're someone who recognizes and creates opportunities, that you will attract quality people because you are quality people. And from that frame, you make sovereign choices, which create sovereign results, which confirm your sovereign worldview. You create a self-fulfilling prophecy of abundance. The frame is everything. Let me give you an example. You're dating someone. 6 months in, they say something that triggers your fear. I'm not sure I want kids. If you're fear-based, you panic. Your nervous system floods with cortisol. Your mind starts calculating. This is it. I'm running out of time. I need to convince them. I need to lock this down. I need to make this work. And from that panic, you respond. You get emotional. You explain why you want kids. You try to persuade them. You communicate desperation. And they feel it. They sense your fear. They recognize you're trying to force an outcome because you're terrified of losing them. And often, they pull away. Not because they don't want kids, but because they don't want someone who needs them to want kids, someone who's making decisions from fear rather than choice. But if you're sovereign, something completely different happens. They say, "I'm not sure I want kids." And your first internal response is not panic. It's evaluation. Interesting. I'm also still figuring out if I want kids with this person. We're 6 months in. We're both still deciding if this is the right fit. And from that place of sovereignty, you respond. Calmly, directly, without emotional manipulation. That's fair. I'm also still figuring out what I want. Let's keep exploring this together and see where we both land. No panic, no desperation, no attempt to force an outcome. Just two sovereign people evaluating whether their visions align. And here's what happens. Often, the other person relaxes because they're not being pressured. They're not dealing with someone who needs them to be something they're not. They're dealing with someone who's also choosing, also evaluating, also sovereign. And that creates space for authentic alignment or authentic divergence. Either way, it's real. This is the power of frame. The fear-based person makes every interaction about not losing. The sovereign person makes every interaction about finding alignment. And people can feel the difference. Kierkegaard wrote about this as the difference between inauthentic and authentic existence. The inauthentic person lives in response to external pressures. The crowd, the they, the fear of judgment. The authentic person lives in response to internal conviction. The self, the choice, the acceptance of responsibility. You've been living inauthentically, in response to fear, in reaction to scarcity, in panic about loss. And it's made you small, made you readable, made you controllable. But sovereignty makes you large, makes you unpredictable, makes you free. So how do you actually do this? How do you shift from fear-based to sovereign? How do you reprogram the operating system that's been running your life? It's not affirmations. It's not positive thinking. It's not pretending you're abundant when you're terrified. It's something more fundamental. You change what you're committed to. Right now, you're committed to not losing, not being rejected, not failing, not ending up alone, not discovering you're not enough. Every choice flows from that commitment to avoiding loss. But sovereignty requires a different commitment, a commitment to alignment, to vision, to creating value rather than protecting against loss. First, you identify your actual values, not what you think you should value, not what other people value, but what you, in your sovereign self, actually care about. Do you value freedom or security? Do you value growth or comfort? Do you value authenticity or approval? You can't have both sides of these equations at full intensity. You have to choose, and the choice reveals your operating system. The fear-based person always chooses security over freedom, comfort over growth, approval over authenticity, because they're choosing from fear of loss. The sovereign person chooses differently, not because they don't value security or comfort or approval, but because they're committed to something larger than fear. Second, you practice making decisions from abundance, even when you're scared, even when the stakes are high, even when every instinct is screaming at you to protect and defend and control. You ask, if I knew I had options, how would I choose? If I trusted my capacity to create value, what would I do? If I believed in my own resilience, what would I risk? And you choose that. Even if your nervous system is rioting, even if your fear is telling you you're making a mistake, you practice choosing from sovereignty until it becomes your default. Third, you let people see your standards. You stop accepting treatment that doesn't align with your values because you're afraid of losing the relationship. You stop staying in situations that diminish you because you're afraid you won't find better. You stop making yourself smaller because you're afraid your full size will be too much. You show people who you are when you're sovereign, and you let them decide if that works for them. Some won't. Some will reject you. Some will choose someone more fear-based because fear-based is easier to control. And you let them go because you're not committed to keeping everyone. You're committed to alignment, to sovereignty, to creating relationships and opportunities that serve your vision rather than just avoiding your fears. Fourth, you become unpredictable. You stop being the person people can read, the one who always responds the same way, the one whose fear makes them manageable. You surprise yourself. You take the risk that doesn't make sense from a fear-based frame, but makes perfect sense from a sovereign frame. You become someone who can't be solved, can't be predicted, can't be controlled. Not because you're erratic, but because you're guided by internal values rather than external pressures. And that makes you magnetic. That makes you dangerous. That makes you sovereign. This is the shift. Not a change in circumstances, but a change in operating system. From fear to sovereignty. From scarcity to abundance. From prey to predator. Not in the sense of harming others, but in the sense of moving through the world from strength rather than terror. Let me tell you what happens when you make this shift. When you stop being fear-based and start being sovereign. At first, you lose people. The ones who were comfortable with your fear. The ones who liked that you were manageable. The ones who benefited from your scarcity mindset. They don't recognize you anymore, and they don't like it. Your neediness made them feel needed. Your fear made them feel powerful. Your scarcity made them feel abundant by comparison. And when you become sovereign, you take that away from them. So they resist. They tell you you've changed. They tell you you're being arrogant or selfish. What they're really saying is, you're not afraid anymore. And I don't know how to relate to that. And you have to let them go, or let them adjust. But you can't go back to fear-based operation to keep them comfortable, because sovereignty costs. It costs the approval of people who need you to be small. It costs the relationships that were built on your neediness. It costs the security of being predictable and manageable and safe. But here's what it gives you. It gives you freedom. Real freedom. Not the absence of constraints, but the presence of choice. You become someone who chooses based on alignment rather than fear, who moves toward vision rather than away from terror, who creates value rather than protects against loss. And that attracts a different quality of person, a different quality of opportunity, a different quality of life. Because sovereign people attract sovereign people. And sovereign people create sovereign outcomes. You stop being prey and you become something else. Not a predator in the harmful sense, but someone who moves through the world with agency, with power, with the deep knowledge that you will be fine no matter what happens, because you trust your capacity to create value. Nietzsche called this the will to power. Not power over others, but power over yourself. The power to create your own values, to determine your own direction, to be the author of your own life rather than the victim of your circumstances. This is what sovereignty actually is. Not confidence in the superficial sense, but trust in your own capacity. Trust that you will figure it out. Trust that you have options, even when you can't see them yet. And that trust changes everything. It changes how you show up in relationships. Not desperate, not clingy, not trying to force outcomes, just present, evaluating, choosing. It changes how you negotiate, not from fear of losing the deal, but from clarity about what actually serves you. It changes how you take risks, not recklessly, but from the knowledge that you're capable of handling whatever consequences arise. You become someone who makes life happen, rather than someone who life happens to. And yes, it costs. It costs the comfortable prison of fear-based operation. It costs the familiar patterns of scarcity thinking. It costs the identity of someone who needs external validation to feel worthy. But what it gives you is everything. Your life back, your power back, your sovereignty back. The ability to look at any situation and ask, does this serve my vision? Does this align with my values? Is this what I actually want? Or is this what I'm settling for because I'm afraid? And to choose accordingly, without apology, without explanation, without the need for anyone else to understand or approve. Just sovereign choice, again and again, in every moment, in every interaction, in every opportunity. This is freedom. This is power. This is sovereignty. And it's available to you right now if you're willing to give up the thing you've been clinging to, the fear, the scarcity, the comfortable prison of operating from terror. There are two types of people in this world: those who move from fear and those who move from sovereignty. And you get to choose which one you are, not once, but in every moment, in every choice, in every interaction. The fear-based person wakes up and asks, what might I lose today? What do I need to protect? What do I need to defend? The sovereign person wakes up and asks, what do I want to create today? What aligns with my vision? What serves my growth? Same day, same world, completely different operating system. And the operating system determines everything: the quality of your relationships, the trajectory of your career, the texture of your daily experience. Fear-based people are everywhere. You can see them in the desperate text messages, in the over-explaining, in the constant need for reassurance, in the inability to walk away from situations that diminish them. They're readable, they're predictable, they're controllable, and they're suffering. Not because life is hard, but because they're making every moment harder by operating from scarcity. But sovereign people are rare. They're the ones who show up without agenda, who evaluate without desperation, who choose without fear. They're unpredictable, they're self-contained, they're free, and they create different outcomes. Not because they're lucky, but because they're operating from a different frame. The world responds to sovereignty. It opens doors. It creates opportunities. It attracts quality. Not because the world is fair, but because the world recognizes capacity. And sovereignty is the ultimate capacity. The capacity to choose from vision rather than fear. This is your choice. Right now, in this moment. Will you keep operating from fear? Keep making decisions from scarcity? Keep being the person who can be read and predicted and controlled? Or will you shift to sovereignty? Will you start choosing from abundance? Will you become someone who's guided by internal values rather than external pressures? The shift is available. Not easy, not comfortable, but available. And it starts with one decision, one choice made from sovereignty rather than fear. One moment where you ask not, what might I lose, but what do I actually want? And then another, and another. Until sovereignty becomes your default. Until choosing from vision becomes automatic. Until you can't even remember what it felt like to operate from fear. Kierkegaard said that anxiety is the dizziness of freedom, the overwhelming responsibility of being the author of your own life. And most people flee from that responsibility. They trade freedom for certainty. They choose fear-based operation because at least it's familiar. But you're not most people. You're here. You're watching this. You're ready to see what you've been running from. The truth that your fear is a choice, that your scarcity is a frame, that your neediness is an operating system you can change. You are not trapped by circumstances. You're trapped by the frame you're viewing those circumstances through. And the moment you shift the frame, the moment you choose sovereignty over fear, the moment you start operating from abundance rather than scarcity, everything changes. Not your circumstances, necessarily, but your relationship to those circumstances, your capacity to navigate them, your power to create within them. You become sovereign, free, dangerous in the best possible way. Someone who can't be controlled because you're not making decisions from fear. Someone who can't be predicted because you're guided by values rather than terror. Someone who can't be diminished because you know your worth isn't determined by external validation. This is the path, from fear to sovereignty, from prey to power, from scarcity to abundance. And it's waiting for you, right now, in this choice. Will you keep letting fear run your life? Or will you take back your sovereignty? The answer determines everything. Fear makes you prey. Sovereignty makes you free. Every choice you make is from one frame or the other. Choose sovereignty. Choose abundance. Choose freedom. The world is waiting to see what you do when you're no longer afraid.